And that's when I really started ramping up this concept of building businesses. And then I would also always approach the owners of the different businesses that I worked in as this busboy that was like, hey guys, I have a really good business idea. Would you like to sit down and can we talk about it? And you got some of that, yeah, whatever. No. What, all that nonsense. And it never changes, by the way. And then eventually one of the guys finally was like, yeah, let's do it.
Welcome back to Empower and Elevate, where we're about to turn up the inspirational dial today. Get ready to be blown away by our next guest. This person is a true maestro in the world of sales, a magician of communication, and yes, he even has his own podcast, Always on the Grow. We're about to embark on a journey of growth and enlightenment, and this guest is the perfect guide. With his wealth of knowledge and infectious energy, he is sure to leave you feeling empowered and ready to conquer the world. So buckle up and get ready for an unforgettable ride. Please welcome Manny Vargas.
My man.
Manny, how are we doing today?
Oh man, what a good morning to start, brother. Nothing like getting on a good early morning podcast with Marc Thomas.
Well, yeah, with the 3 hours difference in time, this is bright and early for you. Did you get some opportunity to take a run this morning or a brisk walk?
No. Yeah, I actually didn't wake up too long before we jumped on here, man. So that was kind of a Saturday breeze, you could say.
All right. Well, you're looking amazing for being so early in the morning. You're just, some of us are just naturally handsome, right?
Yeah, that's right. See, you're smart, man. After how long? Almost a year? I guess we're close. Well, not even. That's what's crazy, man. After maybe 9 months of us knowing each other, you're finally starting to get the point of giving me the compliments that I deserve.
Well, I'll keep that in mind and try to dig out one or two for you on a regular basis. Hey,
listen, man, words of affirmation, man. Give them to me.
So let's start with this. First off, in full transparency, you and I know each other. What did we talk about? 9 months, roughly. I work with you. I was introduced to you by a close friend and a peer of mine. And since then, we've been working together. And as official title as my growth coach when it comes to sales and also when it comes to myself, right? The personal side of things and digging deep inside and working through some things that, need a little bit of work, right? To be better.
Sure.
This podcast in itself stems from my working with you. And I know that you have a podcast and, I've watched quite a few episodes of YouTube and listened to it as well. And, this in itself is the direct impact you've had on my life in the coaching world and, improvement world of Marc Thomas. So first off, I wanted to take a moment just to thank you, for the past 9 months. It's been fantastic work with you, getting to know you. And, you yourself have one hell of a story to share. And having you on this episode to share with others and inspire others. So I can't wait to hear it, record it, and get to share that with others. So let's start. Let's go back a little bit. Manny, you've had a very colorful life. Let's go back to the years of college years and before that. I know you've had some tragedy in your life and a lot of things you've dealt with in the personal side. Take us on that journey.
Yeah, man. Well, before I go there, let me just tell you how much I admire you and how proud of you that I am, because you, despite the challenges that I put in front of you and despite sometimes us going like that, you ever seen two rams kind of go head to head, right? They're just boom. You continue to want to get better. And it's something that I remember in the beginning that I told my wife, which was, you are a great guy to work with because you want to work, you want to change, you want to figure it out, and you're not willing to quit on that process. And you never will be able to quit on that process so long as you are trying to improve yourself constantly and forever. You should be. That should be what you're doing anyway. And so it's been an honor to do that with you. And so, I'm glad that we've been on that journey together. And to see this is great. and already in the first few minutes, it confirms what I already knew about you, is that you're a great host. I can tell already. We've only been started this thing for a few minutes. And so your progress with this will only continue to march forward and explode in your talent and your skill set. And it's going to be a good show over time, as long as you stay with it, which obviously, I won't let you quit on it. So, good luck.
No intentions of quitting there. So
yeah, exactly. You're not a quitter. So that being said, thank you. Yeah, brother. I mean, look, the Vegas jacket is colorful, right? So it has a lot to do with where I come from here, being in Vegas my whole life and being born and raised here. And, you get to go through this thing called life. And some people have great hands that they're dealt, and some people have difficult hands that they're dealt. Some people get dealt a short hand. Some people get dealt a different hand. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And while I get in this position today to share the backstory, I always think about the hand that was dealt to me to put me through life's lessons to help me become the man that I am today, and continue to provide me the future version of myself that I will step into and find and discover. And so, without belaboring the whole journey, I mean, being born and raised in Vegas can have its own ups and downs, which was quite the journey there. But from the standpoint of an upbringing, I had some difficulties early, and I call them really adversities, right? And, now I love the idea of adversity, and the idea of adversity providing you with the opportunity to look in hindsight and discover what it was that, I always say that the man upstairs was trying to put you through to test your strength, to test your battlefield resiliency, to help you become something more than you think you're meant for. Because there's always something much bigger, much greater that I believe that all of us are built for, regardless if that individual has accepted the fact that they're happy where they're at. I don't agree with that at all. So let that be the first thing that is very powerful for somebody to hear. If you're listening right now, that you might be sitting around thinking that, hey, I'm good. And, the words, I'm good, I'm great, I'm happy. I'm okay with you being happy. But to have stalled yourself and not be marching to try out and build up the next thing, the next version of yourself, I think is the greatest tragedy, because I believe that you've quit on yourself, and that there's a lot more in that tank. And so I fight for that when I talk to people, which is, I think those are two of the worst words that could be tricky in the same sentence, because it's like, I'm good. Okay, great. Be happy, be at peace, but push yourself to go expand and become something that you haven't yet familiarized yourself with. So at that process in Vegas, I tell you, man, early on, it was rough. I lost my mom young to cancer. I had a few near-death experiences. I've got this gigantic scar on my face. If I roll in there, right, you can see it right there. Yeah. And it ain't hard to miss. And so there's a lot of ridicule and a lot of joke and a lot of, I would say, insecurity that comes along with that as a kid. So, I'm a 5-6-year-old kid, and, you start having this big, ugly face, and you start to process these things. You start to go through these formative years as a young man, and you start to become, a version that you don't necessarily like of yourself. Fortunately, in that time frame, I started playing baseball right around the same time that my mom died, and I think that was a savior for me. It allowed me to sort of get out and go for certain things that were going to take me away from being distracted by what wasn't happening or what was wrong. And then played through college, and I had a pretty decent talent, but I realized that I was more interested at the time that I got to college in obviously going out, partying and drinking and fucking around, than I was in actually being a great baseball player. Interestingly enough, though, I always had a big dream. And I always wanted to be at the top of the game. As a kid, I remember watching important movies with my dad that were always hero-based. They were always, some guy came to save the day. It was superhero movies. It was those types of things. And I always imagined myself being that guy that would come in. And in this case, I remember very distinctly watching a lot of baseball games on TV, because here in Vegas, we didn't have a baseball team. That's changing as of like right now. We've got a professional team coming out here, which is crazy. But watching the guy hit the home run to win the game and trot around the bases and 40,000 fans screaming like crazy was very invigorating to me. And I'm like, oh man, I want to be that guy. I want to be that guy. And I thought it would be in the baseball world. And then that didn't work out. Obviously, it turns out that I wasn't good enough. Hard pill to swallow, right? When you start getting up into the bigger leagues, college, you realize like, hey, I'm decent in high school. I was good enough to go play college, but I'm a long ways from my major league goal. So again, the man upstairs had a different plan for me. I obviously wasn't good enough. If I would have changed my work habits, my approach to the game, would I have made it a bit further? Yeah, but was I good like that? I wasn't that phenom that I think a lot of guys out there are that make it to the major league. So what happened was I played 2 seasons in San Francisco, and then I ended up quitting my sophomore year. I came back to Vegas, and I started working in the hospitality industry, man. So, and that's where it really got crazy. It got crazy there because I came back to Vegas. I'm a young kid. I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. I'm having a crisis with my identity. And I start working in hospitality on the Strip. My first ever job was at Fiamma Italian restaurant on the Strip at MGM as a busboy. And boy, I was making some dough. Man, I was making some dough back when you're, an 18, 19-year-old kid and you're on the Strip and you're getting all these cash tips. You're like, fuck, I'm kind of rich, And so what happened was making good money, and I start hanging out with all the people that are working at the restaurant, and they start taking me out to the bars, right?
Okay.
Bars, I'm not even old enough. But at the bars, if you know the bartender and you got something like a little fake ID, or if you just know the right person, they don't care because you're going to come in and you're going to spend the money, you're going to pay them. And so it was all good. So now I leave college. I started a little drinking problem in college. I'm like, yeah, kind of flirting with it, making some mistakes there. I get back to Vegas. I now am still drinking, having fun, a little crazy, a little excessively. And then I start gambling. So now I've got a drinking and a gambling thing. That's
goodness.
Yeah, it gets rough, man. So that continues. And then, for many, many years forward, for basically the whole decade of my 20s, Marc, I started to get addicted to the gambling. I was drinking obsessively, and then it became drugs because I was going to the nightclubs and festivals every night when the big electronic dance music scene came out here to Vegas and blew up. So then the Molly and the cocaine became necessary. And then you mix the drinking and the Molly and the cocaine and the gambling and the girls, and it's like you're fucking losing it quick. It goes fast, man. It's like this is crazy. In the moment, it feels like it's the greatest thing ever because you're high as a kite, you're drunk, you're having the best time. People are coming into Vegas all the time. They're buying all your stuff for you. You're going out with them. And that's what I ended up doing, right? I'm taking people out. I'm hosting, I'm promoting, I'm working in the nightclub at this point as I transitioned out of the restaurants. And meanwhile, I was still I had a very big entrepreneurial bug. And so I had an entrepreneurial bug. So even in my younger ages, I was committed to this idea of how do I create a life from a business standpoint? And I'll tell you how this happened, because I went in the summer of transitioning from high school to college. I went to visit my aunt who lived in Switzerland, and they had done very well for themselves. They had built a very incredible business. They had a very great life. One would argue wealthy, very wealthy. Depends on who you have that conversation with. But I got a chance to go out to Switzerland and spend some time with them as a gift that they gifted me, because I didn't have any of that in Vegas. We came from, lower income, kind of family. Family was amazing. They had, some great values, but there was a lot of things that were empty and missing in that category. And so me to go over there and see this idea of a different life was very inspiring to me. And it snapped me into this, what would it be? Alternative reality, right? I was like,
at what age did you go visit?
18.
18. Okay. Just trying
it was a summer between high school and college. I think I'm 18 or I'm 17, 18. I think I'm one of those. I forget. It's so far back now. I start to forget this stuff. But it was that summer going from high school to college.
Okay.
So I go there, and they got a beautiful house up on the hill over the lake. They got beautiful Ferrari. I mean, they're living. And I'm like, man, what is this? And it just kicked in that it was business. And so when I got back to the States, I just had this bug. And I don't think that it was then that the bug was instilled in me. I think the bug was in there much younger, because even when I was younger, I remember in my original neighborhood that we grew up in, we would go around the neighborhood and take our weed whacker or our lawnmower and try to go around to the houses and ask the neighbors if we could take care of their lawns and do stuff for a profit, right? So we were little entrepreneurs trying to figure it out young.
Yeah.
But obviously, environment and conditioning didn't support that until I got exposed to what this could be when I went to Switzerland. And that's when it all switched for me. And so I came back to the States. I went and picked up Rich Dad, Poor Dad Before You Quit Your Day Job, and then started diving into this concept of like, if I want that life, How do I do this? And so it became that I had to start to figure out this business concept. And so at a very young age at that time, so 18, 19, I started thinking about, well, what business can I start? How can I start a business and get this thing going? So anyway, that's a seed that was planted. So I'm going through my 20s now, my entire decade in my 20s, I'm going nuts. I'm partying, I'm gambling, I'm drinking, I'm having the time of my life. It was fun. I wouldn't take it back, by the way, for any. I just wouldn't. It was too fun, man. It was too fun. A story to tell. I think a lot about it. If I would have done this differently, or if I would have just stuck to business early, dude, I wouldn't have half the fascination of the glory of hearing and seeing and feeling and experiencing stuff. It's like I lived a lifetime in that full decade of my entire 20s, right?
So no regrets in your 20s. I mean, obviously it was a learning experience, and obviously you got that out of your system.
Yeah, totally. It's such a part of the story and the journey, because the beautiful thing about that is where I was going with this too, is that in that entrepreneurial spirit in my 20s, despite all this crap going on, I got to the entrepreneur point where we made it happen. And by 25, I ended up owning 3 restaurants.
Wow.
Right? So in the middle
at
of
25,
mess,
you're living this crazy lifestyle, this party lifestyle, but yet at 25, 3 restaurants. Where did that come from? And how did you start that? The first restaurant, let alone the third one.
I was amazed. So when that bug was planted and I came back to the States, I just went on this obsession to try to figure out how to start a business. And the first thing that I did was I started with, at that time, it's crazy to think about now, with what I was doing, because I was in the restaurants, working the restaurant. So that was the only thing I knew. I'm like, well, I'll just start a restaurant. And then I started really going around. So actually, let me say the timetable. So I was in Vegas for the first 2 years after I got back from college. And then I went back to LA for a year. I lived in LA, tried to pursue some different dreams and some ideas there. I was not in LA for very long. I think I was there for 10 months and came back to Vegas. And that's when I really started ramping up this concept of building businesses. And so whether I worked in a restaurant or in the nightclub or I was just around, I was always going to the wealthy person that owned the restaurant, literally, when they would come in, or I would go sit at the casino bars at the Wynn at the time and buy an iced tea because I had no money and sit next to somebody that looked wealthy. And if they looked wealthy, I'd sit down with them and I'd have a conversation. I'd be that random kid just sitting there. And then I would also always approach the owners of the different businesses that I worked in as this busboy that was like, hey guys, I have a really good business idea. Would you like to sit down and can we talk about it? And you got some of that, yeah, whatever. No, all that nonsense. And it never changes, by the way. And then eventually one of the guys finally was like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm like, oh, wow. So he and I started working some stuff and building our relationship at a fairly young age, for me anyway. And turns out he ended up partnering with me. And then in this process, we raised money. And my best friend to this day, David, was helping us look for different restaurants that were available, whether we were going to rent out a unit, build it out ourselves and start our own brand. But in that process, a guy here in Vegas that owned 2 chicken restaurants, it was chicken fingers, wings, beer, wine, and burgers was the, sort of the bread and butter.
Okay.
No pun intended there, of the menu. And so he was wanting to get out. We were wanting to get in and buy something. And so he sold them to us basically at a fire sale. So that's how the first 2 came to life. And, in that time frame, we became the owner of 2 restaurants. And then the same guy that sold me those restaurants, he and I started building a relationship. And then I had another friend at the time that also had run into some money. And so myself, the other friend, and the guy that sold me the first 2 restaurants all partnered on a 3rd restaurant and started that one from scratch. So basically for 3 or 4 years, I'm hustling, I'm grinding, I'm trying to figure out what my business opportunity is going to be. I'm thinking about stuff on the strip, like literally front and center for Vegas Boulevard. I'm thinking about this, and all of it just kept going. And then the chicken opportunities came for those restaurants. And then the milkshake shop was the 3rd one right after that, all in the same time period. And then within about a year and a half, they were all gone.
Wow. A year and a half. So,
yeah, I had no fucking idea what I was doing.
18 months, you went from no restaurants to 3 restaurants to no restaurants, right? Like
to bankruptcy, to losing my girlfriend, to moving back in with my dad, to drinking bottles of Jack Daniels to the face by themselves in one night. Just going back to that place of like, wow, I have to go backwards again, right? I have to go to the place that I was trying to get away from. And I still hadn't resolved my issues with what was holding me back, which was really more of a personal thing, less than it was the drug or the alcohol. So I always tell people this is important. The drug or the alcohol is a substance. It is what it is, but the control comes from me. I'm the one that decides to go pick it up. I'm the one that doesn't have the mental fortitude to say no to that. I'm the one that hasn't worked on myself well enough to avoid it and turn it off and say, nah, I'm good. So anyway, that's an important point. The substance isn't forcing you to take it.
Sure.
You're deciding to do that. So I go back into the real world after that happens. I think I'm 26 now, 26, 27. I go get a job at the airport right here, which is McCarran. Everybody's been to McCarran International here in Vegas as a food and beverage manager. And boy, am I fucking miserable. Like, it's just miserable. I'm just slap dicking. I hate it. I don't have my girlfriend anymore, who at the time I cared about dearly. I'm miserable. I'm back in this stupid job. I eventually get fired from that job. I go out, I get my girl back crazily because I go fight for it. And then I start selling drugs, and I start collecting unemployment because I had a lot of people that were still coming to Vegas, and they all wanted me. They would call me because they knew they were already coming to Vegas in this process, because I had started working at the nightclub by this point. So I was already building the relationship. So then they were coming to Vegas and talk about an entrepreneur. They're like, hey man, I need some stuff. What you need? Cocaine, Molly. Okay, I got you. It's going to be this price. I knew I was buying it at X. I was selling it for Y, and I was building it in there because it's safe. And you have no idea. People wanted the drugs more than anything, because without that, it was not going to be a Vegas experience. So I was able to fucking mark the price up like a maniac and make some good money to take care of daddy.
Manny provided the Vegas experience.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And then,
wow.
And then once I gave it to him, then I started, snorting, popping it with him. And so we had a good old time, man. So it was the best of all worlds in those days, depending on your perspective. So anyway, that being said, so that kind of cascaded. I'm now 28, 29. I'm still floating between different jobs. I tried a few different new businesses. And then right around the end of 2015, right before my 30th birthday, man, is when I decided to get sober. And that, my man, is when it all changed. It was all changed at the time of sobriety. And from there, man, it just took off like a rocket ship, because it was basically me going from this addiction of, okay, I'm now, I'm so having fun with the partying, the going out, the drugs, the gambling, the drinking. I just redirected it back to learning and growing and figuring myself out. And that became the new obsession. And it hasn't stopped. It won't stop now. It's just compulsively in me to learn and grow and figure things out, despite how hard it is. You have no idea, and I'm not saying that from a putting it on you in terms of you've not been through this. I don't want to say, actually, let me roll that back and say it differently. People have ideas about this stuff that have gone through it, but for the lack of the usage of the language, the amount of reinvention that has to happen from a former conditioned self that has gone through 30 years of life and who knows, countless amounts of ways where you've become this thing for 30 years. And then to go back and say, okay, I'm stripping all that out. I'm going out to really recreate myself, and whatever it takes, I'm going to go through that process. That's the journey that I went on, man. And then from there, because of that decision, it got really sexy. I was still promoting. I got sober. I was still promoting and hosting the nightclubs, but I stopped doing the drinking. I stopped doing the drugs.
So you're still subjecting yourself to that environment and around those things, but you had said, I'm done.
That's it, man. Straight up. Yeah, I was actively around those people, and they were actively doing that stuff, drugs, drinking. They would like, hey, a lot of people didn't believe that I was committed to staying sober. They're like, yeah, right, bro. You're going to last 2 weeks. You're going to be back.
Yeah, that's like, a ton of temptation, right?
Totally.
I mean,
but you know what, man? I was so over that self, that person. I was so disgusted with him that I didn't want anything to do with it. And so a lot of people asked me, how'd you do it? And I said, man, it just became something from years and years of loss that piled up. And then after that much loss, you get to a point where you're like, hey, man, I don't want to live like this anymore. There's got to be something better. And so, and plus I already knew I had knack, dude. I was always hustling in the middle of all this stuff. I was always pursuing the entrepreneur dream. I was always pursuing a life on my terms. I was always pursuing the freedom, right? I didn't like being told what to do. I didn't like having bosses. That was not for me. So I was already there.
Yeah.
I was just holding myself back and holding myself back. So when I decided to get sober, man, it liberated me in a way where I could go figure who I was out and start working that process. And then because of that, I went and traveled the country for 2 years, speaking on stages without any experience, never having done it before, literally.
Where did those opportunities come from?
So I met a big speaker in Vegas, and I really believe that the power of, because it's happened, and so it's really tricky. You're in a happy place in your life and you find a path because you're thinking and you're cooperating properly with what you want in your life and what the actions are that you're taking. And then in process, you go and you start eclipsing where you were, you get to these new levels, and then you realize that you have to re-engage that person for yourself and fight back at that next level, because naturally you want to go back and start thinking about what didn't work and why you're behind and what's not working in this. And so you could roll the tape back and end up getting stuck again in what you kind of were before. So you're always engaging in that fight, that dog fight, to outpace your previous self and stay there so that the negative lessens itself. So now I'm answering your question in this way, because I would go to the Mandalay Bay every night and I was promoting nightclubs, and every day I would get up and I would go, this is going to be the day that I'm going to meet this speaker, because that's what I wanted to do at that time. Sobriety came. I started working on myself. I started going to the seminars. I started listening to the podcast. And I was like, I want to do that because I had great stories. So here's where the story comes in, because at the time, everybody was like, dude, if you got a story, you got to tell that story. If you got a story, every stage, every event I went to, the biggest speakers were like, you got a story. I'm like, they sold me, man. I'm like, I got a really good fucking story. Like I got Vegas at that. People want to know about Vegas. I got some good shit. And so crack, right? I got that crack. They're going to want to come back for it. And so I decided that that was going to be my next path, because it was just speaking to me. And I'm like, oh, this is definitely it. Like I got sober. I have the story from the background. This journey's setting itself up very nicely. What do I need to do? Write a book, start podcasting. And then in that process, to get to that point though, I was actively thinking in my head that I needed to get around the right people, and the right people would bring me up to the next level like that. So that became my mission at that time, which was get around the right mentor, let him bring me into his world. And man, I would go to that hotel every night and I would think about, well, there's basically a convention a day here, which literally at the Mandalay Bay, there always were.
True.
Anybody and everybody could come walk through this hotel. And because I was promoting, I could walk around the hotel wherever I wanted. And I was paying attention to who was there. I was very aware. And one day I'm going to be on this floor and some guy's going to come in and he's like, all right, kid, I like you. What do you want to do? Let's go. And sure enough, man, that happened. That one night that I met one of those guys and he came in, I saw him dead on. I was like, I know you. I love your work. I think you're doing amazing stuff. You know, so he's like small talking with me, and he invites me to his event the next day, highlights me at his event the next day. I'm like, oh shit, is this happening? And then about a month and a half later, after a few more steps, he basically said, come on, kid, you know, let's go out and, you know, do some great things. And I'm paraphrasing there a little bit because I don't want to take all the time on this because I'll be here all day on it. But the idea was the intent there of me finding that opportunity at that time and putting in the work to support it really allowed me to get in that position to capitalize on that. And from there, that's when I went off and started traveling the country speaking. Then I came back to Vegas, started working at a company here because I wanted to learn how to sell on the phone, because I was learning how to communicate on stage for 2 years and I was learning how to sell on stage. And then I wanted the other skill of picking up the phone and learning how to make a phone call and close a deal, because I was still nervous in doing that at that time. And so I went into that company, did incredibly well right away, started calling into really large size companies, talking to all the decision makers in the C-suite. And then I pivoted in that company and started running the celebrity division, calling into Hollywood, securing deals with celebrities, agents, managers, working that whole thing for about a year as part of that transition. And then after that, basically went on a journey to start to work on my own stuff. Similarly, around the same time, at that time in 2020, met my now wife. We started dating long distance. After 8 months, we moved in together in Vegas, and then that was hell. And so you talk about like transforming, moving into a small place together on Las Vegas Boulevard, and me being comfortable being in a long distance relationship, but then having to come face to face when I'm still not who I need to be. Dude, if you knew what my wife went to and through to be with me, you'd call her crazy, because any woman would have left my ass lots of times. But we fought through it. And again, man, because of both of our commitments and our desires to be better, we were able to withstand all those storms and come out on the other side. And look, we still have our bickering matches and we still disagree on certain things, but we're foundationally set on a grouping of values and principles. And then in that, I kept trying to refine my entrepreneur identity, which was hard. And so, yeah, man, whether it's like, you think about all this stuff and it gets exciting, and there's these ups and these downs, but then you look back in your life and you're like, man, I've come a long way. I've done a lot. I'm excited about it.
Definitely.
And without all that journey, without all that adversity, without all that challenge, without all that stuff, you don't think back in 50 years, when I'm 90, you don't think back at that time and go, fuck, I wish I would have did something more. I wish. And that for me really gets into me, man. I don't agree with that. Let's play it safe and let's wait and let's do these things later. It's like, no. And I'll final this thought here before you transition with my monologue here that's been going on for about 25 minutes. The reason why I'm so urgent in my time is because my mom passed away from cancer, like I said earlier, and she didn't get a second chance. She was 32 years old, right?
Right.
And so here I was, right around the same age. Here I was, saved, not so much as scarred, hurt, injured at that time when I was partying, going crazy, driving drunk home. I can't even count. Countless nights, not even as so much pulled over, thrown in the slammer, not a reminder. And, obviously you have a belief in certain things, but I was like, hey man, my life was spared. And now what would I be if I was cheating the time that I was allowed on a second attempt or the third attempt, or whatever number that is, but my mom didn't get it. Right. So now I operate from that place of it's go time. It's fucking go time. Right. There's no sitting back, at least as it relates to what I can become, what things I want to accomplish, who I have to overcome in terms of my own self, and what life we live, what kind of experiences we create. Now, is it just, overnight? No, but it's what can I control? I can control my approach, my energy, my effort, the things that matter like that, so that I don't feel that I am not leaving it and laying it all on the table. Right. So, but yeah, man.
So in that case, and you talk about making that change, once again, 29, sober, doing these things, and you talk about the no regrets and hey, not waiting, but we all get to choose between, discipline and regret. And you're choosing, right, to make a change and be better and grow and push yourself.
Totally.
And you brought up another interesting thing is you talked about, those relationships, putting yourself around people, or the gentleman on the stage, you're talking about the speaking aspect and recently, had read an article talking about Harvard University and a long ongoing study they had done about, and talking about how 95% of success and failures are direct relation to those you spend the most time with. So you surrounding yourself with people that were doing the thing, right, and learning from them and striving to want to replicate that and growing yourself obviously allowed you to succeed. Unlike hanging around all the people that was the bad influence and doing the things and partying. And once again, that took you down that path, right?
I succeeded at getting high, baby.
Yeah. There was success there, but not the kind of success you're experiencing today. Yeah. So definitely different.
The
path.
mentorship that I have in my life is unbelievable. I mean, it is the network that I've employed that are playing at a high level is still sometimes a surprise to me, and I pinch myself. And it was hard for me initially to decide that I was going to help with sales because I didn't want to be looked at as a sales guy. I didn't want that to be part of the branding. But then I looked back and I realized that a current mentor slash partner is one of the best sales professionals and individuals that has sold tens of millions of dollars worth of his own products on stage, off stage, online.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have another mentor, is a dear friend of mine. We're writing a book together right now, who is one of the top B2B sales trainers in the world and has one of the largest channels and followings in sales from original deployment of their brand and so forth. And so then I have working at the company here in Vegas with another very big business influencer that is known as one of the top closers in the world. And it's like, it goes on and on and on. And so here I am, talk about a story, right? Again, being around the right people. So when I go to you and you're trying to figure out why you should hire me, and you're thinking about, well, can Manny help me? And I'm sitting here telling you like, hey man, this is what I've done. Number one, here's where I've been. Number two, and here's who I've been around. Number three. Right. I mean, if you go back, I mean, I remember, I think distinctly sharing that on one of those original calls that we had with that group, the peer group, which was, like, tell us about yourself. And I'm like, well, I know I can sell. I know I've sold a lot, and I know I've been around the best in the business. So I think I know some stuff, kind of like that version of it. And yeah, you just realize, like, and again, that's that kind of inward battle you're going through where you're not calculating perspective properly. And I fell victim to that. I don't like to use that word, but the reality is I fell for the illusion. That's the better way to say it. I fell for the illusion of thinking that and letting my ego drive this idea that, oh, it would lower me, or it was such an inconclusive decision-making process that prevented me from taking faster action on this sales concept, that because I was avoiding it and having such a hard time, I created other stresses in my life for, over a year, 2 years, maybe, versus if I knew this ahead of time, it would have just been decisive and we've been gone way before. But this is the point of always on the grow for me, which is the concept of us always and never ever giving up on figuring out that next version of ourselves, which is constant progress, which means, well, I just had to overcome some of that stuff. That's some of that purging of that identity in there that doesn't support you. And it's not fun. It's hard. In the moment, it's like you want to quit, you want to give up. You think it's time to put in the white flag, but you're like, no, I've committed to something, to figuring this out. And because I committed to that, over time, it started purging itself out. It started sweating itself out. Now, I can't turn you guys away fast enough, man. You guys want to throw me all your money in it.
Well, and you say the essence of life is growth, and you can talk about the continuous growth, always on the grow. Do the best you can. When we talk about always learning, always growing, if you look at a tree, how tall will a tree grow? As tall as it can, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
it doesn't stop at my height, and say, okay, I'm done. No, it grows as tall as it can. Now it could have other trees around it that's, that holds it back, right?
Sure.
Doesn't get the daylight, doesn't get some of the nourishments, but once again, it goes back to, you take those out of the ground, it's going to continue to want to grow. It's going to grow. It's going to take off.
That's it. And funny enough, we had a tree right here out in front of our yard as of maybe 2 months ago now. That son of a bitch was getting big. I'm like, dang. And it was becoming a nuisance. And I'm like, okay. And so then not long after that, because we have a really amazing property management and association here that takes great care of our neighborhood. It's pristine. And I'm thankful for that standard. But they came in and they started pulling that son of a bitch out of the ground and uprooted it, and it was out. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know you were doing that. They don't tell you, by the way, because this is their land. They just do what they want. And so he ain't there no more. So unless you uproot the thing, right, and take it out like that, in that case, he's done because he ain't got no more roots down there. But if he wasn't, he probably would have grown all over this place.
Yeah.
They just keep going and don't stop. But
So,
to your point, that's a great point, man.
Yeah. So turn things back a little bit. You touched on the 18 months of restaurant ownership, which sounds amazing and fun. It's especially at that age. What was the biggest contributor, do you believe, sort of take out the partying aspect, to the demise of those three businesses?
Sure. That's a great question. I really didn't know what I was doing operationally.
Okay.
I think you can figure that out. I was glorified in the idea of owning the business rather than being the business owner and figuring out how to actually be that person. Obviously, I wasn't that person, right? So there's just no chance. There's no chance. I mean, you even in that case, man, with my identity the way that it was, for example, the night before we opened our milkshake shop for friends and family, I'm talking about the night before, I'm at EDC Las Vegas, the biggest carnival for fucking electronic dance music with the biggest DJs in the world. And I'm fucking high as a kite. And to make matters worse, I remember very distinctly on Sunday morning, Monday morning, because it goes Friday, Saturday, and it's Sunday. And Sunday it goes until midnight, 5 a.m. 5 a.m. it closes Monday morning. I popped a Molly right around 5 a.m. to finish. And that night we had our friends and family for the opening of the restaurant.
Goodness.
Milkshake shop. So you don't know what you're doing when you're running the business. You're not learning to figure it out. You're just running in circles. I'm running amok out in Las Vegas. I mean, it was a host of different things, right? But again, man, I mean, I forget sometimes, and my wife would even tell me, she's like, because in a newer level of life, I still feel there were some versions of those scars that haunted me in taking steps in this now modern day. And I realized that there was a very big value in a lot of the things that I did because I did hire people. I had a great team of people that loved coming to work. I had a great energy there. We had people that came in that loved our product. We had a variety of things that were working well that kind of demonstrated the things that I was good at. And so uniquely, that's not everything you need because, again, it's just one of those unfortunate situations that business just kicks your ass if you don't know what you're doing. And so, yeah, man, I mean, there's no way to pinpoint it outside of the fact that I was not yet the person that I needed to be in order to run and build and hold on to a successful restaurant. There's no other way to look at it.
Sure.
Right. You can look at the actual disease, or you can go look at the fact that there's a symptom coming out from the disease and you can try to put the Band-Aid on the symptom, or you can go in and you can, like the tree, take the damn root out. Right. And so for me, the root was just, hey, I wasn't who I needed to be.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. I was just kind of curious, if you're reflecting back at that you pinpointed, and it sounds like there was a few things obviously that influenced that, and and
there's a lot that I forgot.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years, right? So
a couple.
You touched on too. You always had this desire, this entrepreneurship desire, and I think statistically, I don't remember the exact number, but I know that it's a large chunk. This, maybe it's 35, 50% or whatever, that have a kind of intent of desire to be in business or be an entrepreneur. But yet today, standing, I think it's somewhere around 6% that are actually entrepreneurs. So you are obviously part of that minority today. Not only did you have that desires as those that did, but actually you've done it multiple times, right? You continue to say, this is what I want to do. I'm going to be in business. I'm going to control my destiny. And I commend you on that. Obviously you've never given up. You're always trying something different. You touched on currently co-authoring a book. This sounds like it's in process, but you also mentioned in the past about a book as well. So what was this book that you wrote in the past? How long ago was that? And what was it about?
Yeah, that was right when I came out. So, when I started my journey of sobriety, right after that, when I told you I wanted to become the speaker, sort of the gateway, or what I was sold or told, was you got to have a book, right? And it's kind of the door opener. And I bought into it. I'm like, oh, great, let's go, And then shortly after that was, podcast. I'm like, wow, I can start a podcast. And so basically, they kind of came back to back. The book first, podcast second. But at the time, I just took my story, man, of it's actually, well, there you go.
It's
man.
right there. Okay, wonderful.
Oh, yeah. So
Las Vegas.
So it's 4-part, right? And so it's if you can see there, right? And I'll read it out loud. So if you're listening, you can hear it. But part 1 was the struggle. And then part 2 was the discovery of, fuck, my life's a mess. Part 3 was the reflection, going back in time to look at all the things that I had to think through, work on, understand. And then part 4 brought us back to the moment of the present, right? And so in that, I basically just documented all the crazy stories, told people what the journey was like, and then shared with them what it was like for me to come out of that, and then what I started working on and the new perspective that I had. And yeah, man, it was a great experience. I was very proud to write the book. Obviously, that was the first book. And so a lot has changed since then. There's still a lot that we want to accomplish. Obviously, a book is a book. Again, now in the world of sales, nothing gets to its potential without a sale. So, obviously you want to sell a lot of books. The book writing world is great, but the book selling world is even better, because if you can sell a great book many, many times over, well, then that's a whole different ball game.
And we all know there's millions of books out there.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. Only a few have been sold, right? And so the next one is revolving around creative sales and communication, to really think about the process differently. And man, I'm fired up about this book. This book is going to be like anything, or should I say, unlike anything anybody's ever seen.
Now, I personally have been through your sales appeal program or course. The book, will it tie into the sales appeal, or is it something totally different?
Yep. So for clarity, we have a training program, a course that is a parlay of skill sets and experience that one of my mentors, has taught me, has lived, has made his fortune off of. And we took that course, and I recorded it from the angle of it being ours at the time, because he's like, go for it, because we basically have this opportunity. So let's do something great with it, because it's great material. Obviously, that.
Yes.
So that's a partnership. That's a separate product.
Okay.
And then I have my own, what is now evolving method that I've created based on a lot of other things that I've experienced and what I find to be my sweet spot, my wheelhouse for how I sell and how I get out into the marketplace. So they're independent, but I'm very much a user of both methodologies, because both methodologies have been a part of everything that I've done.
So you think they would complement each other then, as far as once it's,
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. When do you think that'll be in print?
It's a good question, man. It's a creative book, and it's got a lot of creative elements. So it's not this just page turner where you're going to have, full page of just black print. Have a lot of different elements coming into it. And so I'm not trying to rush it, one, because I don't have the worry about a deadline of an agent or someone trying to tell me when it needs to get done.
Publicist or somebody, yeah.
Yeah, it's usually the agents. If you get a book deal versus you self-publish. Now, again, I'm all for having deadlines and you work towards something. But in this case, because it's a creative book, I'm letting it marinate. I'm letting the life experience come through. And by the way, it's got form. It's got a lot of substance already. It's got a lot of direction. It's got its main parts. And so you just don't know where that next thing's going to come from. And so I want to build a great product. So I'm not trying to rush building a very great creative product around the idea of this concept of sales. So,
well, no rush, not push. I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah.
And once again, and as long as it takes Manny, hey,
I know.
once it comes, I can't wait to see it.
I don't need you down my back, Marc. Get off my back, man.
So, and where, let's talk, you talk about sales appeal and obviously writing a book on I guess your process and where did your desires from sales come from? Okay.
So I'm going to answer that question and then we're going to leave your audience with the cliffhanger because I got to take my wife out for the morning, morning festivities. But we're going to do part 2.
All right. Doing part 2. I would look forward to that.
You listen to my podcast all the time. I always set people up for part 2s, right? So you probably have heard that before. I wouldn't even say that it started off with me having a desire for sales. I think that if you look back in life, you realize that there's always, again, this is probably heard this a million times, and I don't disagree with it. There's always a version of some sales or influence coming in. Where it got real for me was I was always out there. I had a lot of desire to do things that revolved around making things happen. So for example, raising money for the businesses. My desire, my energy was the catalyst for that translated to me being able to sell well in those days.
Okay.
I had no idea that I was formally selling. I had no idea what the skill sets were. I didn't do any of that shit. None of it. And so naturally I had a knack for that. Now it makes sense. But if you move the mile marker forward and you start talking about formalizing it, it was when I went out to speak around the country and I was beginning to learn to speak on stage and sell from stage. And it was at that time that I realized, oh shit, like I don't know what I'm doing. This is now a different level of skill set that I have to learn in order to eat, in order to make the money like these guys. Because the guys that I was around were selling from stage and they were making millions of dollars, millions. And so I was like, oh, okay. I don't know what they're doing or how they're doing it. I see, but I've got to go figure this thing out. And that was the catalyst of the journey from that point for me to start going and reading the books and listening to stuff revolving around sales. And then shortly thereafter, I remember I was in Scottsdale, Arizona. I was out there. I was living out there because I would travel to different cities and I would stay in that city for 2 or 3 months. And we would do a lot of mini events. And I would go to local events and I would speak at those local events. And then at that local event, we would sell tickets to a bigger event that we would do every quarter-ish. And so we would put a couple hundred people in the room from those small events. And I remember I was driving on the freeway and I remember I was cruising and I was like, oh, I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I got to figure this thing out, this sales thing. And so that kickstarted me to start to go even further into figuring out who the top experts were at that time. And I think Grant Cardone was one of the first ones I started listening to. Jeb Blount was another one in the B2B side of things. And so I just started studying the material and began to now understand the concepts some more. And so what happened is I was getting I guess you could say a master's in understanding how to communicate and be confident and step up to the plate and let it go on stage, which is not easy. So I was becoming a great communicator. And then once I started realizing I needed to formally learn the skill sets for sales, and then I started to marry those two, is when I started to realize how much better I was getting. And the third thing in that, Marc, was that I was willing to put myself in the bad situations that I thought at the time were uncomfortable and go into the phone room and start making the phone calls and not sound perfect and not do it right and make the mistakes and hang up on myself. And so similarly, I had these other mentors that were also active in my life that were great at the skill set as well. So then I started to really double down on the fact that they were the best at their craft. And I was like, oh, okay, now I really start to understand that this is something I'm really great at, right? And there are people that are better at it than me, that have different attitudes, that have different personalities, that stylistically do it differently. And that's fine. I have my angle, my attack, what I like to do, and my approach, and it's paid off for me. But ultimately for me, its desire was baked in the fact that I knew because I had heard everybody talk about it from an entrepreneurial perspective, was that if you don't learn sales, you can't be an entrepreneur. Like, I'm like, oh, fuck, I got to figure this thing out. Like, if sales is the first door you have to go through as a business owner in entrepreneurship, for a variety of reasons. But also I realized that if I didn't learn sales, I would always be struggling to make myself more valuable in the marketplace. Right. So that was also a big thing. So I think that's a combination of the effects. And one would say, like, the question of the desire, where it's sort of the genesis of it came from and what was fueling me at those times to go into the skill set, to get better at the skill set, and then eventually get good at it, and then evolve it over time, where, how do we take this? And now today's modern world, how do we take this skill set and make it a coaching and consulting and training business and maximize it? Now you've got to go from, oh, I'm just good at sales, to now I got to build a company. Now I got to go get my customers results. Now I got to be there for my people and show them that this works. And then we've got to figure out how to systematize this, how to add on to it, how to expand it. Right. So that's an ongoing thing. That's a fairly new on. When we met, I had helped people with sales, but I wasn't decided or focused on working with you and your industry or that type of customer. I wasn't yet. We were practicing. I knew I could help, but we were still defining what we were planning to do. And then we started to chisel and got clearer and more clear. And then you invested, and the next guy invested, and the next guy invested. And I'm like, oh, I think we got something here. Okay. Flag is planted. Let's go. Right. So now we're clear on that. We get results, we do the right things. And then eventually we build this thing to grow and expand beyond us, where it becomes a real company. Right. So, but yeah, man. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's me.
Well, hey, to bring this home, I two things for our listeners and our viewers here. To learn more about Manny Vargas and what you offer in regards to coaching, if someone were to pursue that, how would they make contact with you? Where do they go?
So there's a very, I appreciate it. There's a very unlikely chance that they would actually get coached by me unless they're in your business, which, if you're listening, there's a good chance that you are in the MSP space. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I'm very much in a season of saying no. Okay. However, I would love for you to come take a listen to the podcast. You can always go listen to the podcast, Always on the Grow with Manny Vargas, which is on all the audio channels, which is on YouTube. We've got the YouTube channel. Okay. All the recordings are on there for you to watch them from the studio. And then on social at This Is Manny Vargas. I mean, you can find a lot of the stuff that I put there. From a coaching standpoint right now, because we're so focused, if any random person's listening to this, we're not going to do anything with them at this moment, because we're very, very focused and clear on who it is that we're helping right now. So if you're an MSP, feel free to reach out to me or connect with us somehow. But otherwise, hey, good luck to you.
All right. So Manny, and is it just to define MSP, managed service provider? That's what we do, at least as far as in my day to day. And right. Always on the Grow. Once again, great podcast. I always look forward to listening to those, to consume those in multiple means. And I also look forward to having you back for a part 2. And That's any of our listeners, viewers, have any questions for Manny in the future, make sure to comment, and we'll get those asked next time. Manny.
That's right, man.
Go get some breakfast with the wife for the birthday. Thank you so much. Love chatting with you, and you have a great day, my friend.
Appreciate you, brother. We'll catch up shortly, man.
Sounds great.
Great job, man. All right.
Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, man.